Good afternoon all. Welcome to the Planning Committee meeting today, the 15th of May 2025 at 4 p.m. Thank you all those who are already in attendance. I understand we've got some people maybe coming in late. To start with, I must apologise to all present that we do not have Welsh translation today due to unforeseen circumstances by me. I was only notified just before the meeting. May I remind everyone present that this hybrid meeting of the Planning Committee is being live streamed as well as recorded via the internet, and this recording archived for future viewing. Could all participants please mute themselves when not speaking in order to avoid any background noise or feedback when other participants are speaking? If a participant wishes to speak, can they please raise their hand in person if sat in the chamber, or use the remote raise hand function? If a participant raises their hand via the remote function and is not subsequently invited to speak by myself, please could they turn their camera on to indicate or place a message in the chat function. When invited to address by me, please could all participants ensure that their microphone and camera is on to ensure that they can be seen and heard when actively participating. If this is not possible for any reason, please bring this to the attention of myself and or the Democratic Services Officer as soon as possible. Please ensure that all debate is raised verbally and not via the chat function for the sake of the recording. The chat function may be used to highlight any technical issues and or to grab the attention of myself or Democratic Services Officer. If any participant has difficulty hearing or being heard when they are addressing the committee, then they should let me or the Democratic Officer know. So please, could I welcome all committee and non-committee elected members, our officers, public speakers, residents, and also to anyone watching the live meeting broadcast. And that. So starting with the agenda, agenda item 1 is apologies for absence. Matt.
Thank you, Chair. And we've had apologies received through from Councillor Champion. I've also had apologies from Councillor Cowp, who's running a little bit late, but is hoping to join us online as soon as she can.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We then come on to the minutes of the meeting held on the 27th of March 2025. Can I agree that as a, can we agree that as a true record?
Happy to move.
I'm happy to second.
Thank you very much. Moved and seconded. Right, coming on to the agenda, the next agenda item, which is the minutes of the meeting on the 10th of April.
Happy to second.
Yeah, I'm not moving at the moment. I have a bit of I've been requested to add into the record. In approving the minutes of the meeting held on the 10th of April, I've been requested to note for the record that in relation to agenda item 6, certain comments were made by the applicant's agent, which may have related to a member of this committee. It is recorded that the potential member in question was not present in the chamber and could not respond, as they declared a personal and prejudicial interest and did not have a right to reply, as it would not have been appropriate for the member to do so in the circumstances. So the proposal is to add that into the minutes of the 10th of April. And on that basis, can we accept and move that? Ian, you've got your hand up.
Happy to move. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm happy to second that and agree that as well.
Thank you, Mark. Right, moving on. Declarations of interest and the nature of such interests under the Council's Code of Conduct. Are there any declarations of interest in any matters on the agenda today?
Just to advise, Chair, there were no declarations received prior to the meeting today.
No declarations received. In that case, moving on. Agenda item 4, building regulation applications and other building control matters determined by the head of sustainable development under delegated powers. These are for noting.
Happy to note, Chairman.
Thank you. Notes be moved and seconded. Thank you, Councillor Johnson.
Seconded.
Agenda item 5. Planning applications determined by the head of sustainable development under delegated powers. Again for noting. Yeah.
Happy to move we note, Chairman.
Thank you.
We got Marianne on the call.
Yeah, I've
Seconded.
just noticed, welcome Marianne, you managed to get home, the traffic wasn't too bad then.
Seconded, Chair.
Thank you.
So,
Right, moving on, agenda item 6, appeals. Liam, I believe you're taking us through this.
Yes, Chair. Yeah, I'll briefly run through the appeals in your agenda, members. So we've got the appeals report, some stats in there again. In terms of planning application decisions, at least, the stats show 87% of these have been dismissed on appeal and then 13% allowed in that period. Quite good there in terms of 3 out of 3 enforcement appeals being dismissed and upheld on appeal, so 100% enforcement appeal record. 7 new appeals received, all written reps in the first couple of pages of your papers. So those will obviously go through the normal course with PEDU. There are 9 appeal decisions then summarised in your papers. 7 out of those 9 were dismissed. Some particularly good decisions there, and I won't go through each of them, but some decisions in there around barn conversions, upholding our policies there in terms of barn conversions and protecting the character of those buildings. Some decisions there in terms of unjustified dwellings in the countryside. Decision there on the householder large dormer extension. And then an unauthorised extension to a bungalow, which was dismissed. So that was one of the enforcement appeals. As well as a fence, then a fence erected at a dwelling, proposed for retention at the frontage. That again was dismissed. So some good decisions there. There were a couple allowed, as you can see in your paper. So I'll briefly summarise those ones. The first one is the first one in the sort of pack of summaries there. It's on Holton Road. So it's 20 to 22 Holton Road in Barry. The appeal there related to the conversion of part of the upper floors of the building into 4 flats. So they were proposing 2 flats on the first floor and then 2 on the second floor. Retail use to remain on the ground floor, along with like a storage area to the rear of the site, which would be accessed from the first floor, or on the first floor, access from the amenity space that would be proposed for the flat. So during the course of the application, officers had some concerns with the application on 2 fronts. First, there was concern in terms of the living accommodation provided in the flats, in terms of the room sizes. So we do strive for developments to have sufficient space for future occupants, and then there was secondly concern about the amenity space being proposed at the back, and particularly in terms of its usability, because occupiers of the first and second floor flats would have to go to the ground floor, sort of go through the building and work their way to the back. So it wasn't a particularly usable space, we felt. So we refused it for, the reason read, the development fails to provide the occupiers of the flats with adequate living accommodation, in addition to a suitable area of outdoor amenity space. And we said the proposed development would therefore be of a substandard form of living accommodation that fails to meet the basic amenity requirements and impact upon the future well-being of the occupiers. So in terms of design, our reports set out the internal layout that was proposed, and that the associated dimensions we felt were important. So we'd referred to standards which are in the Welsh Development Quality Requirements, the DQR standards. We referred to that as standards, and we referred to the fact there isn't a specific policy that sets out standards in terms of our planning policies. So in that particular standard, the DQR states that in the case of a 2-bedroom, 3-person flats where there's a common access, as was the case here, each unit should have a minimum gross internal flow area of 58 square metres. In this instance, the maximum ground floor area of each of the units proposed was 49 square metres. So there was a shortfall there in terms of the minimum standard. But we did accept in the report that this requirement relates to the delivery of affordable housing and not open market units as proposed in this case. So we did feel, quite strongly that we should push for better standards in terms of space. Nevertheless, we felt the council obviously needs to be satisfied the flats would provide that overall amenity space. So in terms of our SPG, that talks about the scale of a new development must be appropriate when compared to the original property. We felt the scale of what was being proposed here would intensify the use of the property. So we were getting 4 flats on the upper floors and the retail use on the ground floor. And we felt, given that the occupant numbers potentially in each of them, it would be a potentially cramped building. So in terms of that, we felt it fell short of those standards, and which is a recognised standard, albeit it wasn't tied to the SPG or an LDP policy. So this would then be amplified by the lack of what we felt was suitable and accessible amenity space, so the space at the back. So in effect, we refused for the main reason of a lack of internal space, resulting in overdevelopment, and then the amenity space not being suitable for those occupiers. So as you'll see in the report there, the inspector disagreed with our reasoning. They considered the flats would be reasonably sized, each have 2 bedrooms, bathroom, kitchen, lounge, and then reference that each habitable room would be served by a window. So they referenced in their report that aside from referring to size, that we didn't describe why we considered the accommodation was substandard, and then mentioned our reliance on the Welsh DQR requirements, which are not planning policy. So there's probably a bit there we can do in terms of going away in the future and looking at that issue on other schemes, particularly in terms of how we, if we do refuse, how we justify that refusal. And it's probably an issue we need to sort of tackle in our replacement LDP, particularly in terms of how we have a policy to tackle it rather than rely on other standards. So as part of the appeal, you'll see in there the appellant submitted an application for costs. So costs can be awarded regardless of the outcome of an appeal against a party who's behaved unreasonably, thereby causing the party applying for the cost to incur unnecessary or wasted expense. So as mentioned, really, the inspector felt we hadn't described why the accommodation was substandard, but we had referred to the size of the accommodation, which we felt was, important in that respect. But then the officer report did refer to character of the area, which then didn't translate into a reason for refusal. And then the other matter raised was that in a refusal reason, we'd cited amenity space being decisive. We'd cited it being a decisive issue, although during the appeal process, we had referred to the fact that had the internal space been adequate, this matter could potentially have been dealt with via a condition. So the inspector considered the applicant had incurred the unnecessary cost of pursuing that appeal. So there's probably areas there we can look at in terms of lessons learned going forward, and also area for our LDP in terms of how we can get a policy to deal with this going forward. So that was the one there. I just thought I'd talk through that in a little bit of detail, just so you could understand it. There was one more as well, just briefly. There was one for it was a dwelling house, and there was a building allowed in the front garden area, Gwynfa, Penline. It was an outbuilding, and the inspector disagreed with our approach on that one in terms of they felt the design was okay. We didn't feel it was okay, so it was a matter of judgment. But yeah, just thought I'd talk through those. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Chair. I hope you can hear me. I couldn't hardly hear you, Chair, there. Chair, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
I can't hear you.
Right, there you go.
We can hear you, Councillor Wilson.
I
Carry on.
cannot hear you, and I can't hear anyone.
That I sus-
I cannot hear anyone.
I can't hear Neil either. I can't hear Councillor Thomas.
I can't hear Councillor Thomas either.
Can people hear me? Or is it a problem with the chamber or just with Councillor Thomas?
I can hear you, Ian.
Okay,
I heard you, Ian, but I can't
okay, so
hear
Councillor
you.
Thomas's microphone then, I imagine. I don't know if
Ian, I
we're trying
can't
to
hear
resolve it.
Councillor Thomas.
Okay.
Hello, can I hear anyone?
Right. Yeah, I can hear it echoing in the chamber now, so I
Okay.
assume that's now working. Sorry about that. It was a technical problem that that we do have occasionally. I asked whether anyone had any questions or queries for Liam on the appeals. Councillor Johnson has his hand up.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm not sure if Councillor Wilson is able to hear us now, is he?
I know, Mark, did you want to ask something about the appeals?
No. Okay. Thank you, Liam, for the information there regarding particularly the appeal on 20 to 22 Halton Road. This is the upper floors above a store. Obviously, I'm a town centre councillor, and this kind of decision is therefore of great interest to me because we have a tension between sort of a more permissive nature and the anticipation of using space above shops for accommodation, and therefore it's interesting that that the concerns raised by the council, in particular regarding the living space and the amenity space, have been overruled by and substantially overruled by the inspector, because also awarded costs against the council. I'm just wondering, in terms of those lessons learnt, I'm aware that you said that you want to look at this in the context of the replacement local development plan, but I'm just trying to understand what exactly the lessons learnt might be, given that we are being put in a situation by the inspector. It appears that that anything which goes above a shop is considered, sort of almost a type of permitted development. So it's clear that I think that we're probably on safe ground in not supporting development which would impact upon the the A1 nature of our central business district. But it also seems that this seems kind of a carte blanche for development above shops. And while I'm in favour of development above those shops, I think we all need to understand quite where that line of best fit is going to be, because I don't want us approving rabbit hutches and inappropriate development just because they happen to be above a shop, and that supposedly makes the town centre more viable. So I'd be interested to hear some comments on that, Liam. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. I concur with your view. The idea of using accommodation above shops for accommodation it is a good thing in my book, but to have tiny, as you call them, rabbit hutches, I think goes against the principle. But I understood from what Liam said that the intention is to look at it in terms of the RLDP and incorporate the legislation in that way. Correct me if I'm wrong, Liam.
Yes, that's right. I mean, in effect, what the inspector's doing is saying we can't use the standards to sort of justify our position, but what we need perhaps to do before we sort of go through the LDP process and have a policy specific that looks at it is perhaps provide more evidence, because I think what they said, we've referred to size, but perhaps we haven't gone a bit further in our report to sort of say, well, why is that an issue? And on appeal, you have to document why you're refusing something. I think there was a term in the report that we'd sort of moved from considering the size and impact in terms of amenity of occupiers to saying that there was an impact on the character of the area, which are two different things. So there's bits there that we can perhaps scrutinise when we are actually refusing on that ground. And I think because it was that ground as well as the access to the amenity space, there was an issue there in terms of how that came through in terms of the inspector's decision, I think. So, yeah.
Councillor Johnson, you want to come back?
Yeah. Not supposed to come back, Chair. It's just to clarify a point, which I think the earlier discussion was, or is that there are standards which exist for affordable housing in its formal sense, but not for those in the private rental sector in terms of the floor space. So just Liam could just sort of clarify that there exists a set of standards for one, but fundamentally an open market for the other. Is that the case, or have I misunderstood that? Thank you.
Ian Robinson
Yeah.
actually, I think, wants to come in on this. So could I invite Ian Robinson to comment?
Yes, fine. I wasn't going to preempt the Councillor Johnson's question, but I'm happy to respond on that while I'm here. Yeah, there are space standards required for affordable housing. I think what the inspector's point was that the minimum standards for affordable housing shouldn't be also taken to be kind of minimum standards for basically habitable space. What I wanted to share was my kind of disappointment in the decision and to kind of defend the reasonableness of it, because what we're all about trying to ensure better quality developments and better quality spaces, and we've been supported on appeal numerous times on what others might think are kind of more trivial matters like absence of a window serving a room, and there's no specific standards that say there has to be a window in a certain circumstance, but it's a judgment about what amounts to a reasonable quality of space. So given that we are consistently winning appeals on things like absence of windows, it's disappointing to me that rather than actually looking at qualitatively, is that an adequate space, the inspector seems to have said there's no standard, so you shouldn't be refusing it effectively. I was disappointed that the inspector didn't look at it in its own merits as they would with a window issue, for example, and still conclude it's not a quality space. It's one for us to be careful with in the future, but I just wanted to kind of flag that. I think it wasn't an unreasonable decision in my mind, so not the best decision in my opinion.
Thank you, Ian. Mark, Councillor Wilson, you have your hand up. Mark?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you. Yes. A couple of things. First of all, the planning officer shouldn't beat themselves up about all this, because you think the fact you've got 87% going in your favour on appeal is commendable. And I think that you're doing a fantastic job where, very lots of people get disappointed, obviously, if they don't get their decision that they want initially. And obviously they've got an automatic right of appeal if they want to use it. I know it's not automatic, but you know what I mean. And clearly, I think you're doing really well. I think it is disappointing, the decision on Holton Road, because obviously we should be about amenity space. People need decent space to live. But on the other hand, as you know, we've got a real housing crisis as well. So it's a dilemma, and you could argue for both, I feel. But really, I think we need to keep our standards up as we do in the Vale Glamorgan. And, and can I say thank you all the officers here for making sure that 87% is very good. And I'm sure it's probably one of the highest in all the councils in Wales.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Unless, Liam, you have anything to sum up on, I think we can move on from that particular agenda item to agenda item. Perhaps we need to move and note the appeals. If someone would be
happy to second that as well.
Thank you, Mark. I'll take it that I've moved it then. Moving on to agenda item 7, trees. Again, the delegated list. This is for noting. Can we move and note?
I'm happy to second that, Chair, as well.
I'll move it then. Then we come on to the meeting of the afternoon, which are the 2 planning applications. There have been matters arising on this. We have 2 outside speakers registered, 1 for each, and I'm aware that the local member wants to speak. He's also Councillor Morgan has also circulated to all, or it has been circulated on his behalf to all members of the committee, a letter from him explaining his concerns about the Panther Ffynnon Quarry in Bonvilston, which I hope people have had the opportunity to read, but they did come through very soon before the start of this meeting. So moving on Old Wallace Farm, Dufferin. I think Steve Butler, you're presenting this.
I am. Thanks very much, Chairman. If I could just have the slides up, please. So there we go, Old Wallace Farm in Dufferin. So next slide, please. So the application site itself is mainly a parcel of land, plus the area shown in red as the access at Old Wallace Farm, located in Dufferin. The site is located within the Dufferin Basin and Ridge Slopes Special Landscape Area and is outside of any defined settlement boundary, and as such is classified as falling in the countryside. Just next slide, please. In respect of its wider context, as you can see, the site is located to north of Barry and to the east of 5 Mile Lane. And then obviously to the west of that is we've got the 5 Mile Lane, and it's to the south of Dufferin. The next slide shows the site in a bit more localised context. So the site itself is accessed from St Lythans Road. It then runs along a section of private track through Old Wallace Farmyard, which is located kind of to the north of the red dot. And then the site then is accessed via a kind of a stone sort of gravelly track from the farmyard to the south. The next slide, please. I think you might have skipped a slide, possibly. No. There might be a slide showing a public right of way. I think, yeah, sorry, there's a more updated slide, but there are some public right of way to the west of the site. About 350 metres to the west is public right of way W2, and to the north of the site there's another public right of way W23, which is about 380 metres from the main part of the site. So if we just go to the main site layout. So it's an application for the construction operation of a battery energy storage system. So 56 battery containers are proposed. Each will comprise of a lithium-ion battery cell, complete with energy storage management system and mechanical ventilation. So the layout you see in front of you is kind of the layout of the compound area. So the sort of green rectangular shapes, those are the energy battery containers. So they're kind of set on sort of concrete plinths, and then around that, then you've got the cabinets, you've got switchgear, and then kind of to the south of that in black, you've got the substation area in the compound, and also the network operator control room. Also included within that, you've got a welfare container and a storage container, which are in blue and red. And in addition to that, I think it's a circular image, is the 240,000 litre water tank and pump. So the site itself is going to be enclosed by a 2-metre high palisade perimeter fence, and includes security gates and CCTV. The works also include the internal access road around the internal site, and also a section of new, I think it's going to be in grasscrete, that lead out of the site along the site edge red, and to the point in which it picks up the kind of stone track. If we can go on to the next slide, we've got a couple of cross sections through that give you a little bit of an idea as to how the site's going to look. So battery units to the right-hand side in green, and then you've got the substation in the middle, which is one of the taller structures. Then you've got the access track shown. And then if we can go on to another section. If we go on to there's another plan below that. So that's just a bit of more of a zoom in, really, the dimensions of the battery units. They're about 2.6 meters high and about 7.8 meters deep. So the next drawing shows the layout in a bit more detail. This is a kind of an indicative landscaping plan. So, but nevertheless, it kind of shows you the colorings, and you get an idea of the feel of the site. So the southwest boundary, that currently that's not there. So at the moment, this is part of a much wider field. So the proposal is to create a hedgerow along that boundary, and also to undertake tree planting along that boundary, as well as tree planting along the other boundaries of the site. And the bottom then of the site, you've got the kind of attenuation basin which is going to accommodate, obviously, from a SEDS and a SAB point of view, drainage water arising from the site. So in terms of more generally, say the tallest structure is about 6.7 metres tall. That drawing there shows the colourings of the unit. So partway through the application, because the site is in the countryside, officers felt that I think that the default position was that these enclosures and compound areas were going to be white, and obviously white in a landscape, in a rural landscape particularly, is quite an alien feature. So we worked with the agents and landscapers, etc., to come up with a colour palette that we felt was as much as possible could kind of screen and soften the impacts of the development. So you can see that sort of that RAL colour. All the structures will be in that RAL colour to the left. And then you've got fencing and gates, which are in that kind of like a dark greeny grey. So we just go on to the next photo. That photo is taken. That's a CGI. So again, it's based on a sort of suggested landscaping scheme. So again, it's not based on a specific landscape layout, but this is the kind of impact that you would see. This is based at year 15. So year 15 is 15 years on from the planting that will take place around the site. So the boundary that you see on the right-hand side, that's the new hedgerow that's going to be created with tree planting. And I think the proposal is to allow the hedgerows to grow out. In addition to that, there are sort of intervening tree planting around those boundaries. So that gives you a kind of feel of how the site will look. I mean, to some extent, it would appear a little bit like a sort of treatment works that you'd find for sewage undertaker. That kind of feel about it. So the system itself. Obviously, it's designed as a battery energy storage system that would be connected then to a pylon supporting the existing overhead structure. Through underground cabling, which is located to the south of the site. So the proposal itself doesn't propose the actual connection. The connection point will be made by the district network operator. So from the kind of termination point within the site to those overhead pylons. But just very briefly, in terms of the facility itself. We've been advised that it would power approximately 75,000 homes for 2 hours on full charge, and the capacity is 49.9 megawatts. In terms of construction phase, it would take approximately 6 to 12 months to be built. That's based on an average 22 working days per month. Just very quickly, in terms of the assessment, Planning Policy Wales and Future Wales support the principle of development of renewable energy sources and storage facilities, and particularly Planning Policy Wales states that energy storage has an important part to play in managing the transition to a low-carbon economy. The growth in energy generation from renewable sources requires the management of the resultant intermittency in supply, and energy storage can help balance supply and demand. Proposals for new storage facilities should be supported wherever possible. So whilst the battery energy storage facility itself doesn't generate electricity, it does allow renewable energy to be used in a more efficient way, creating flexibility. So obviously both wind and solar are naturally intermittent, and the battery storage facility allows for that energy to be stored when demand is higher, than when supply is higher rather than the demand, and then feed back into the grid when there is more demand and or less supply. So we feel that the battery energy storage facility therefore plays, a really important role in future-proofing the grid network in terms of resilience. So in terms of the site selection itself, the application has been supported by an alternative site assessment. This states that steps taken to identify alternative sites have been used to find a viable grid connection. We've been advised that nationally there are limited opportunities available for grid connections. The application site provides opportunity for connection and has been selected following the site selection process, which assessed both previously developed land and greenfield sites. It is recognised that there is a preference for such developments to normally be in developed or edge of town or industrial areas. But in this case, obviously, the siting is reliant on the actual grid connection point itself. And in this instance, no suitable other locations were identified. So the connection point, therefore, if it is utilised, would be reliant upon a battery storage site located on agricultural land and within the countryside. So just to summarise, consultation responses have been received from a number of external and internal consultees, and their comments are summarised in the report. Objections have been received from a number of neighbours, as set out in the report, including a local group, which is a campaign against East Vale overdevelopment. The comments have been summarised in the report and in the main relate to concerns over landscape impact on the highway, safety and fire. In addition, comments have also been received from Friends of the Earth, Barry and Vale, relating to concerns of fire and thermal runway. The application is recommended for approval, subject to a number of conditions and informatives. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Steve. Can I just point out that there was a typo error in the conditions as well that you were going to address. We talked about it earlier. Condition 14, page 118. The word "not" has been omitted from the condition. It should read: equipment at the site should not result in the noise levels exceeding 30 decibels. Compelling us to go above 30 all the time, I think, is a little strange. So I'm assuming that amendment's fully accepted. In that case, we have a speaker on this, Mr. Hayden Kreitzer, who is speaking for the application and is the agent. Mr. Kreitzer, when you start, your time will start.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon, members. My name is Hayden Kreitzer, and I'm representing Greenfield Energy Developments, who are the applicant for this application. At Greenfield, we specialise in design and construction of key renewable energy developments. We've partnered with landowners, communities, investors to deliver battery storage solutions. We currently have projects across Europe. We have 5 gigawatts of battery and solar capacity across the UK, Italy, Romania, Bulgaria, and Spain. And we've worked closely and positively with your planning officers, and we are very grateful to receive a recommendation for approval for this application. There is a clear and urgent national and local need for new battery energy storage infrastructure. Welsh Government policy seeks to significantly increase the delivery of all forms of renewable and low carbon energy to achieve the decarbonisation of the grids by 2035. This cannot be achieved without battery storage to support the network at all levels. There are currently limited points of connection for the grid in South Wales, and the only one, Aberthaw, is within the Vale of Glamorgan. This development presents an opportunity for significant energy storage projects into a well-connected part of the existing local electricity network. Securing a timely grid connection is a critical enabler for renewable energy infrastructure to contribute towards the zero carbon electricity network by 2035. However, as stated, the grid connection availability is currently constrained. This project has an agreed connection date with the network operator of 2027, meaning the development could come forward within the next 3 years. It is very unlikely that any other new connections requested in South Wales will be possible before 2036. This is due to the ongoing government grid reforms taking place. As part of this application, we have undertaken a robust alternative site assessment. This sets out why the site was selected and why it is the best and only suitable site for this development within a 1 kilometre search area around the overhead line, which the project will connect into. Delivery of this development will provide the direct local benefit of enabling power to be stored and distributed to the equivalent of 75,000 homes for 2 hours when required, as well as achieve the estimated minimum carbon savings across its life cycle of 1.2 million tonnes of CO2. In addition, this development also provides biodiversity enhancement to the existing green infrastructure on site through an extensive landscaping strategy, and the temporary use of this site for battery storage facility will allow the soils to rest, and in addition of not using fertilisers, will improve the soil quality on site. Councillors, you have before you today an essential renewable energy project with officer, statutory and technical consultative support, which can make a substantial difference to the climate and energy crisis, both nationally and locally. We therefore encourage you to support your officer's recommendation and approve this application. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Kreitzer. If you could just stay on the line for A few moments while I see if there are any points of clarification from any members of the committee. If there are, could you, Councillor Buckley?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Creature. Where you're saying this imperative about joining onto the grid, why, I couldn't see it in the report, why is it unsuitable for you to go on the site of Aberthor's old power station where all the stuff, the infrastructure is already there and you're not?
So as we've said in the alternative site assessment, we take a grid-led approach. So we go to the network operator, identify the capacity, and then we do the 1 kilometre search around the sites. Once this creates a long list and a short list, which are the best possible sites. We then run through those against different planning constraints. So if it's high agricultural classification, so it's optimum for growing crops and flooding, things like that. Once we have all those constraints, we whittle it down to the best sites, and this was the only one that had the least amount of impact. So ideally, yes, if we get closer to the substation, that would have been ideal. But this was the only optimum site we could find.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other points of clarification? Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, just about impact upon the lithium on the site. And obviously, lithium is highly flammable, and obviously there are concerns about the possible heat generated. I just wonder if we could have some sort of reassurance on that.
Yes, no problem. So with this site, we've submitted an outline battery safety management plan, which runs through how the site was designed against the fire safety standards. I think it's also worth noting this project is lithium iron phosphate, so it's slightly different to the old batteries. So lithium iron phosphate, when it heats up, it can't combust, so it won't catch fire. So I understand that there's a lot of press and news around the old lithium ion batteries catching fire, but in this case, it's the whole site's been designed to strict safety standards. So once if this site is approved and goes forward, a detailed battery safety management plan will be submitted as well, which will outline all these factors with the technology that gets put on site.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Mr. Creature. Councillor Bruce, you have your hand up now.
Yes, what access is there for the fire people, and do they get involved with the safety aspect of it?
Sorry, I missed your first question there.
Sorry, the fire people, is there access for fire people, the fire engine if required? And
yes.
Do they get consulted with the design, etc.?
Yes, so as part of the application, we've submitted a emergency access plan, which shows the fire engines coming through to the site and accessing it. There's 2 emergency accesses, so if there's any danger to the site, the site is easily accessible. We have designed the site in line with the National Fire Chiefs Council, and it's been raised at PREAP as well, so they have input to design.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Perry, you have a point of clarification?
Yeah, just going on to that sort of last statement, which are the access routes to the site for fire engines and even construction vehicles? Because the lanes are rather constrained, and just this last week we had damage by a vehicle to the traffic signal at the top of Dufferin Lane, and also damage to a residence wall. So the lanes there are very narrow, and if there's an emergency, you need to get a fire engine down there pretty quick. There's no guarantee that you can actually get past other vehicles like agricultural vehicles and other delivery vehicles.
So we have, what part of the plan application, there's a transport assessment and the emergency access plan, which shows the swept paths of the vehicles coming through site. This is also done for the construction vehicles as well, which I believe the largest vehicle that will come to site is an 8.25 rigid truck. these plans show that it's possible to get up these lanes and there's sufficient passing places. We've also been in consultation with the highways team as well, and they've raised no issue with this.
Thank you, Mr. Creetzer. Right, I see no other hands up, so I assume there are no other points of clarification. So thank you very much for your time, Mr. Creetzer.
Thank you very much.
Liam, do you have any comment to make upon what's been said so far? No. In that case, I'll now open up the meeting to members for discussion. Is there anybody who would like to say anything about this issue at this time? I see no hands, therefore I assume everyone is content with what they've heard so far. Can I assume that Councillor Wilson, you've got your hand up now?
I'd like to propose that we support this application.
Councillor Johnson.
I was just going to speak briefly, Chair.
Certainly.
I think the major issues that, as I understand it, with this application relate to the initial location, which has been sort of explained away in the context of there being an alternative site assessment and this being the most appropriate one that's come forward for this matter. There has been there are concerns regarding the access to the site, particular because this is an area which has largely made up of relatively narrow lanes rather than major routes, and so the effect on that. But it appears that our highways team have no concerns regarding that because of the number of appropriate passing places. The issue that appears to me to be raised by Friends of the Earth, and I'm a bit surprised in some respects that we're here today without representatives from. I appreciate the comments that we have from the whatever that is, East Vale Overdevelopment Group or Friends of the Earth, but they don't seem to be here to speaking to us on the matter. But the main concern seems to be the possibility of fire risk and the appropriateness of the response to that in terms of the amount of water provided, which I think is 240,000 litres. I'm not an expert. That sounds like a lot to me, but I've no idea quite how much sort of you'd be anticipating to deal with a fire should such a thing happen. And sort of the comparison of the technology, which I think was raised by the speaker. I think I'm just looking for, because we have referred to in the additional papers published yesterday. We have sort of suggestions regarding a what's the phrase? It's indicative or it's informative. Regarding the who actually has responsibility for ensuring that the right thing is done here. And I think I'm concerned that, I'm not concerned, that's the wrong phrase, but we have a couple of proposals, it seems, regarding construction management plans and battery development management plans. And I'm just looking for reassurance with those, and also with the fire safety risk issues that the appropriate people will be consulted upon the detail and minutiae relating to this site, because that seems to be part of the concerns raised. Whether it's Natural Resources Wales or Friends of the Earth seem to be saying that the appropriate experts should be consulted upon these proposals, and I think we need to be sure that if this is something that's that we're having a couple of flags being raised about the what happens if it goes wrong, and I think I need a little bit more reassurance that we will be consulting the correct people, and that some of those positions can be challenged by those who are interested in this case. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. I see Steve Butler's got his hand up to reply, but I also have Gillian Bruce's hand up, Councillor Bruce, and maybe if we ask her for her view, and then Steve, you can reply to both.
Thank you. My concern is we've got this huge development that could be quite risky for 2 hours worth of battery storage. Doesn't seem an awful lot in my opinion. Just my opinion.
Yeah, Steve, would you like to respond to the comments so far, please?
Absolutely. Just taking it in reverse order. Obviously, yes, it's correct. It's approximately 2 hours, but obviously that's 2 hours for 75,000 homes. So make that, that is what it is. But obviously, that's quite good resilience if there's kind of an outage for 75,000 homes, which in terms of the Vale is, I would say, quite a significant proportion. Just picking up on Councillor Johnson's concerns. The issue of say concertina responses and sort of fire risk and management, etc. We deal with that under page 109 and 110 specifically. So a couple of things I'd just like to point out really. So we've consulted everyone that we can consult in respect of this type of development and battery storage. So just to confirm, we consulted Fire and Rescue Service. They didn't raise an objection. They certainly did, as we've said in the Matters Rising note, made comments on the potential risks of these type of battery facilities. But as the applicant and the agent has stated, in this case, it's lithium iron phosphate, which I believe you don't have the same kind of problems with sort of thermal runaway that you do with the normal lithium type batteries. So it has been, we have looked at this in quite detail. We've spoken to, for example, the council's civil protection team. Environmental health as well. Ultimately, the safe operation of this facility falls within the remit really of the applicant and their management. Obviously, we do what we do in terms of planning applications, making sure from a construction point of view that things are safe and highway safety is safeguarded. But in terms of kind of the operational phase, it is down to the operators themselves. I think they provided us with 6 pages of regulations of which they need to comply with. So ultimately, it's that regulating authority to make sure that they comply with their own regulations. So it's not the job of the planning system to ensure compliance with other regulations, as we've kind of said many times. We can certainly point people in the right direction, but obviously I guess the applicant knows the business that they're in. They're certainly fully aware of the types of regulations required. So again, page 110 of the report covers that. I think it's worth noting that these battery storage systems aren't particularly new. They are often incorporated, albeit to a lesser degree, within major applications we get for solar farms under the DNS process. And just to point out, for example, a decision at Oaklands that is north of the site, the planning inspector, in allowing the consent or granting the consent, did look at fire risk. And if I just quote this, he says, with regard to fire risk associated with the BESS, there have been significant safety improvements in technologies used and fire suppressant systems generally. A 3-stage fire prevention and suppression system built into the design will ensure that risk is managed out. Housing the batteries in modular containers provides an additional layer of protection by reducing the risk of spread. Safety measures are presented in the battery fire safety statement. If we could have the slide back up, the last slide on this presentation for this application does set out the fire safety details, which I would ask members of the planning committee to read. Obviously, we are talking about an up-to-date system, and it's worth mentioning, obviously, that the technology is improving all the time. So I'm happy just to read this out. So each unit is equipped with advanced multi-layer fire detection and suppression systems capable of identifying early signs of thermal abnormalities such as heat buildup or smoke. And the detection system includes integrated heat detectors, smoke detectors, and gas detectors. Just running on. In the event of a fire, an automatic aerosol-based fire suppression system would be activated. That would use a clean agent extinguisher medium, which is non-conductive, residue-free, and specially chosen for electrical environments. Additionally, the source system includes a liquid-based thermal management system, which is a closed-loop cooling system with heat exchangers, etc., and cool pumps to regulate the battery cell temperatures. All of this then would minimize thermal stress and enhance safety performance and reduce the likelihood of thermal runaway. All components, including the fire safety and thermal control systems, are fully pre-integrated within the containerized system, allowing for safe operation on site and compliance with international safety standards. Together, those systems ensure a high level of operational safety and resilience, making the battery installation suitable for long-term secure deployment in a wide range of conditions. So, the application, for example, it doesn't. We haven't. I mean, they have submitted a battery management system that is set out in the condition, but it's generally part of the approved plans. So I'm just looking. Yeah, there's an outlined battery safety management plan, which is part of the condition 2. So we haven't asked for any additional information over that, effectively because we would not be the controlling regulator to oversee the acceptability of that scheme. So again, that's down to a separate regulator to ensure that's in place. But so there are, quite a number of conditions on here, but most of them, in essence, relate to kind of the visual and the construction side of the development. Operationally, it's very much down to the relevant regulators to ensure compliance. Thank you, Chairman. Happy to take any more questions.
Thank you, Steve. Councillor Perry, you have your hand up.
This isn't the Oakland solar farm, and it's not Park Dufferin, both of which I believe have got battery storage, and both of which have easy access to main roads. The Park Dufferin from the A48 and Oakland's from the A4226. This is at Park Walton, which is accessed off St. Liddon's Road, which is a minor rural road, single track with passing spaces and 90-degree sharp bends. So it is not suitable in parts for 8-metre long vehicles, whether you're going up past Dog Hill or out towards Tehran. There are obstructions there, which means to actually get to where we have the access plan, you have to get to St. Liddon's Road, which means you're going down Dufferin Lane, which, as I said just last week, there was an incident with a lorry knocking a wall and demolishing a traffic signal. On that road, we have Tinkinswood, we have the National Trust at Dufferin Gardens. So if fire was to break out on a busy summer afternoon, you've got all that additional traffic. We have towed caravans. We have a campsite on there which has got permission for caravans. So a fire engine might meet someone towing a caravan of some size. So there's all these kind of uncertainties. Whereas if you're on the A48, yes, we do get road closures and congestion and Welsh water causing havoc by unannounced works which aren't properly signalised. But you could get a fire engine past. I'm not convinced you can actually get to the site to get onto their access plan, unlike the other sites. So this is a very different site to the other solar farms, and I believe the other solar farms put in their battery application to PEDRU along with the application for the solar farms, where in this case they've come back later on with the battery. So why wasn't this battery application done at the same time as the actual solar farm and gone through PEDRU? Were they perhaps afraid it wouldn't pass the PEDRU test? I don't know. So they've now come to us. There's lots of uncertainty. It's a new technology. Of course, there's uncertainty. How do we manage risk? Are we risk averse, or do we seek risk in putting this in this particular location? I'll let Stephen come back in now.
Thank you, Councillor Perry. Stephen.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. So if we could get the slide up, just on the access issues, we have a slide that shows the construction route. And I'm not saying that, obviously, in the case of an emergency, the fire service will get to a site the quickest way that they can. But just to emphasise to members that I wouldn't say the site was significantly remote. So you've got 5 Mile Lane there. This is and then there's the junction off. And really, it's still, even when you come off 5 Mile Lane to the east, it's still quite wide till you take that kind of 90-degree bend to the northeast direction. I mean, fire risk is fire risk on any development. Obviously, this is a rural vale as well. There are many hamlets and parts of our authority that are accessed down single width lanes. That's the character of the Vale of Glamorgan. Just on Councillor Perry's comment about the application being kind of not part of the DNS application, it's a different applicant. This has nothing to do with the DNS. This is a standalone kind of operator who would provide these sort of facilities. So it's nothing to do with the DNS application at all. It's a standalone battery storage facility. Nothing to do with the DNS. So again, just to re-emphasise that no concern was raised by the fire service in relation to the accessibility of the site. They would have no doubt looked at that and looked at all the supporting information, and they raised no adverse concerns regarding access points. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Steve. Councillor Perry, you have your hand up. I assume that's a legacy hand.
Am I coming on? Can you hear me?
We can hear you. It's just...
It's not, yeah. Oh, there you go. That's why I can't see myself. I still got concerned over these 90-degree bends and mishaps and.
Yeah, I think that's actually been addressed. I think Steve just addressed that. I mean, you're asking the same question again.
Yeah, but I don't think the answer was satisfactory. I'm not.
Sorry,
that's your view. It's just that the question has been asked and answered.
Yeah, and I think I'm allowed to express my opinion as well.
You are, but
sorry, Chairman,
you're now being argumentative.
There is a slide. There is a slide. If we can show the photos again, there is a slide that shows the junction off St. Livens. That's the slide there. So, okay, I mean, obviously it is a rural vale, it's a single width lane, but that junction is quite wide. And I wouldn't say this is a tortuous site to get to, and it's absolutely in the middle of nowhere. So, I mean, obviously it's for members to decide whether the site is appropriate, but all I can say is the consultation response in respect of fire safety have not raised any adverse comments in relation to the site's location and accessibility.
Yeah, but that's not the right 90-degree bend.
Ian, please, yeah. Councillor Perry, you're now being argumentative. Please stop.
I don't think I'm arguing. I'm just stating a statement of fact that is not the 90-degree.
No, you're stating an opinion.
That is not the 90-degree bend I am concerned about. So you can say that 90-degree bend isn't a concern. I might agree with you, but there is another 90-degree bend which is a concern, which is relevant to what we're talking about. Thank you.
Yeah, but I think that was addressed by Stephen earlier. Can you put your hand down now, please? Thank you, Councillor Perry. Councillor Wilson, you have your hand up. I assume you moved officers' recommendations.
I'd like to move the report and support the officers' recommendations.
Do we have a second for that? In that case, I'll second it. Councillor Johnston's asking for a point of clarification.
Sorry to come back in, Chair. In his response to me, Steve, when we were discussing the outline battery safety management plan, which is part of the paperwork on the planning portal, he said that it wouldn't be coming under the veil to ensure that this was being adhered to. I'm just wondering if you just remind me which regulator would be accepting responsibility for ensuring these things are operated properly. Thanks, Steve.
There are 3 or 4 pages of regulators. I would say it's probably it would appear to be in the hundreds in terms of every single regulator that would be involved in the battery, and obviously the DNO and the distribution of electricity. It's very heavily regulated, and there's regulators probably at each stage in terms of the batteries, in terms of the DNO connection, in terms of, so there's, that I think that's the point really, is that other regulators deal with it, and the fact that we almost can't say what the other regulators are. I mean, we've had a list, and there's about 4 or 5 pages, and there are, I would say it's in the hundreds of regulators that would oversee every element of the kind of, functional operation of the battery system. I can't say specifically. It is in the, that's information that we've had, but again, it's, as we've always said, it's down to those relevant regulators to regulate their own kind of legislation. We have to deal with what we deal with. Nevertheless, the safety management plan is in condition 2. We feel from a planning point of view, we have enough, again, to get development off the ground. It's not just about planning, it's about getting all the regulators together and in line, and making sure that certainly the applicants and the operator need to ensure that all regulations are complied with, and planning is just one of very, very many. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Steve. In that case, the officers recommend. Oh, Councillor Cowpe, you've come on screen. Is there a reason? Marianne, you have your hand up. Marianne. Councillor Cowpe.
Can you hear me now?
We can now, yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Sorry about that. Sorry, I just following on from what Councillor Johnson says, and I appreciate what Steve's saying, that there are hundreds of regulators, but and perhaps it isn't for this, but I just raise it now. Is there a chance here that because we don't know and it's not named, that it ends up not being regulated at all? Everyone thinks someone else is doing it. I mean, could that be a condition of planning, that we need to have a named senior regulator or whatever it is, overseer? I don't know, maybe it's not for planning, but I thought as it's brought up, because if nobody's responsible, then things get missed.
Well, I guess all the regulators are responsible, so I don't think you could connect to basically the highest power overhead transmission line without a regulator being involved. So again, it's, we've seen the list. There are very, very many, and you couldn't condition the lack of compliance with a regulator wouldn't necessarily be a reason to. It's a bit like ensuring that you've got building regs, or planning's job is to deal with planning and the regulations within planning. We would be kind of forever chasing our tails if we had to ensure compliance with all the regulators. I believe the energy business is probably regulated than far more, than many other types of businesses. So it's not. So I definitely know what you're saying. Obviously, the concern is if things kind of do go wrong. But all I can say are there are legislators in place to make sure things don't go wrong.
Yeah.
I'm presumably before I would assume before the connections. Obviously, the network operator anyway I would assume, this is just purely would assume and do a full inspection before they would allow then the connection, because they would be doing the connection anyway to the overhead power lines. So it falls under the legislation, and we're constantly being told that planning needs to do with planning matters and not replicate or duplicate other legislation.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Chair.
Thank you, Marianne. Eddie, you have your hand up. Councillor Williams.
Yeah, only to say that it's been moved, and I'm happy to second so that we can go forward.
Thank you, Eddie. It's been moved and seconded. There seems to be some discontent amongst 1 or 2 people. Therefore, we'll go to the vote. If you're in favour of officers' recommendations with that one small minor amendment to condition 14, inserting the word not, then If you're in favour, vote yes. If you're opposed, vote no. Oh, I've got to get that in. All votes are in. Officers' recommendations are supported with 2 opposed and 1 abstention. Moving on, we come to agenda item 8B 2024-00246 Environment, Pantaffin Quarry, Bonvilston. Caddy Rowlands, I believe you're going to take us through this, please.
Yes, if I can get the slides up, please. Okay. The first slide is up. So the site is a limestone quarry off Pantaffin Lane, just south of the A48 near Bonvilston. The quarry is intersected by a highway, a small lane, which and it overall covers a combined area of approximately 8.8 hectares. Mineral extraction is currently taking place. This is taking place on the southern side of the quarry, and the plant and processing machinery, etc., located on the northern side. So just a note on procedure. This is a review of minerals permission application. So it's submitted to us as the Mineral Planning Authority under the Environment Act 1995. This is for approval of a revised scheme of working and schedule of planning conditions on an existing quarry site. So the process has been designed to allow historic planning permissions to be updated with modern conditions and to ensure that extraction operations take place in line with the current environmental standards. The application or the minerals applications are reviewed. So there's a set process where this happens every 15 years. The application cannot be refused, just for members to note, but is open to us to consider the adequacy of all the planning conditions and also to impose new conditions. So it's a question of which conditions are reapplied. The applicant has submitted a schedule of new conditions at the outset to control the continued running of the quarry and its subsequent restoration. Most of these conditions only seek to allow the continuation of the quarry operations as they are today. So, in line with the previous conditions that were stipulated. However, there are some variations sought, and I'll run through these now. So, if you can go to the next slide. So this is a topographical plan of the northern quarry, and it's proposed to resume extraction in this quarry. So the plan you see there is approximately 89 metres above ordnance datum, and it's proposed to, if we can go to the next slide, to deepen the quarry sequentially, but down to a level of 65 metres above ordnance datum again. So it's an additional depth of approximately 24 metres, but as you can see on the plan, it's a series achieved through a series of benches. So as the quarry gets deeper, it'll get progressively, a lesser area would be quarried out just because of the need to provide benches for health and safety purposes. So in addition to the extraction, if we go to the next slide, there's outline restoration proposals put in for the northern quarry. What you'll see here is the slope being provided on one side of the quarry, the southern side of the north quarry, using soil forming materials. What the reason or rationale for this is that just south of the line or the southern line of the quarry that you see there is the highway, and it's in very close proximity to the quarry edge. So in the long term, limestone's a very competent rock, but in the long term, to prevent the upper face weathering and potentially causing highway safety issues in the future, it's proposed to cover this face and provide a 1 in 3 slope for safety purposes, essentially. So that covers the activity in the north quarry. So if you can move to the next slide. This slide is again a topographical plan showing the southern quarry, but with the addition of a new ramped access. You'll see in the centre of the drawing the existing ramped access, which is quite steep, and it's proposed to provide a more graded access, as you know, in line with health and safety purposes, really. But also doing that would release that area underneath the existing ramp in the centre and allow it to be for additional minerals to be extracted there. This does really fall within the guise of the existing permissions, which are in the southern quarry. So it can, the quarry can be extracted to that depth, and also the road can be put in under permitted development rights, so which apply to quarry sites. So quarry sites have permitted development rights to create and form new accesses in essence. So yeah, I think that's it in terms of the southern quarry. So yeah, next slide, please. Okay, could we get yeah, that was coming. Okay. So in line with the additional release of minerals, the applicant has proposed to implement highway improvements. So I'm just going to run through these as well. In the yellow colour, you'll see the existing alignment of Pantyffynnon Lane with the A48. That's proposed to be widened with the orange area highlighted, essentially. So that would allow for HGVs to more easily pass than at present, because although there is room for 2 cars to pass, certainly it's a little bit narrow in terms of getting 2 large vehicles to pass. That is within the highway extent, the orange area shown there, and it's proposed to widen it for a distance of approximately 170 metres as well, which will provide, again, additional capacity for HGVs to pass one another without transgressing onto the grass verge, so that the orange area here is currently a grass verge. So yeah, next slide, please. And I'm shown on this plan as well are 2 passing bays which are proposed to be created for the remainder of the lane, which is otherwise be retained at current width, and also shown are the widened access quarry access points. So this, and I understand, has already been moved to the location shown on the right hand side of that drawing. One further thing on there are vehicle restraint systems proposed as well. So these are the steel barriers you quite commonly see on the side of the road. That's to prevent vehicles or to reduce the risk of vehicles exiting the highway. I've just included a few photographs here. So this is one of the North Quarry in around 2020. This is another one in 2023. So you can see a bit of a difference there between the current operator, the current operators. Bridges took it over, and there has been there have been some limited blasting in the Northern Quarry to expand that's the scope a little bit, but it's not been deepened, and you can generally see these 2 photographs are from a similar position, and it sort of outlines where they're at. And then, yeah, next slide, there's a couple more just showing the Southern Quarry for context, and one final one, which is the access to the A48, and it also shows the area where it's the same landowner, but they've installed a gate at this point, where there was an existing field access. That's a separate matter, which has been raised with our enforcement team. So, yeah, I think that covers the slides, but I think there is a couple more things I'd like to go through. So just to summarise the proposals, the change involves a resumption of the extraction in the Northern Quarry for the winning and working of limestone. This isn't permitted by the existing permission, so it's something the applicant is seeking to change, together with an amalgamation of the end dates for extraction until 2042. So currently, I'm sure you've noted, part of the site has a end date of 2042, and part of it is 2025. So that the the part with the end date of 2025 is predominantly the southern quarry. Yes, so moving on to representation. So we've had representations from 28 households. There's a detailed summary of this in the report, but the main areas of concern relate to procedure, traffic congestion, highway safety, neighbouring impacts such as noise, vibration, dust, flood risk, contamination, and a lack of justification for additional extraction. St Donna's Community Council have objected for similar reasons, as have the Tyrone and Llantrithid Residents Associations. Also of relevance, and I'm sure you'll have noted, there was an application made in 2021 which also sought approval for additional mineral extraction in the North Quarry, albeit this was to a lower depth of 54 AOD opposed to 65 we have in front of us today. That application also is just a full planning application, also included the establishment of a waste recycling facility, which also is omitted in this, and it included the backfilling of the Northern Quarry completely. So this is to surface level. That application was refused because the extent of backfilling proposed was considered excessive, essentially tantamount to landfilling. So you'll note there's a substantive reduction in that as part of the outline scheme in front of us today. Yeah, and just to summarise, the application 2021, it was concluded that the additional mineral extraction was acceptable in principle as well. And just to go over probably the main 2 points of objection or concerns that have been raised to us. In regard to noise, there is some differentiation between the two planning permissions that cover the site, the minerals permissions. In terms of noise, it's proposed to amalgamate those and basically adhere to those which are imposed as part of the 2009 permission. We consider those that they're in line with the most up-to-date guidance. There's no adverse comments as well from our minerals advisors. That's Carmarthenshire County Council have a dedicated team. Also from Shared Regulatory Services, no adverse comments from them in terms of noise. And in terms of highway safety, I think one of the main things to consider as well is compared to the application in 2021. That 2021 application proposed an increase in the annual tonnages allowed, so from 250,000 tonnes per annum to 300,000 tonnes. That is proposed to remain at 250,000 as part of this application, so that's staying the same. And the other matters to consider are the highway improvements as well. So although the tonnages of the daily output, not daily outputs, but the annual outputs, which would affect daily flows of traffic, although they've not been increased, there are still substantive highway improvements included with this application. So I think that summarises it for me for now. So I'll go back to you for.
Thank you very much, Kerry. We have late reps on this, which I hope people have had the opportunity to look at. We've also had the letter from Councillor Morgan clarifying some of the things that he wishes to speak about. He, not being a member of the committee, but as a local member, has the opportunity to speak. So, Councillor Morgan, if you come on, it's your chance now. You have 5 minutes, I believe.
Starting from?
Now.
Right, okay. Well, I've been asked to call in this application by the Welsh St Donna's Community Council with concern for the residents of the Tyronan community of 38 homes whose proximity to the quarries is shown on aerial photographs circulated earlier. The quality of their lives is already adversely affected by the quarry operations, by noise, dust and vibration, and this will be made worse if today's application is granted. It's important that local residents are given a proper consideration by this committee, as has been done in previous applications of local concerns, such as Model Farm Roofs and the Barry Incinerator. As time is limited, I will not repeat observations already included in the report and trust that committee members will give due consideration to representations made by Jane Hutt, Alan Cairns and the clerk to the Welsh Endurance Council, pages 136, 140 of the report. There's concern at the limited scope of the initial statutory consultation. The report cites 28 objections, but does not include the Residents' Association submissions from 30+ residents, nor the petition signed by 69 residents for the 2021 application for this site. On page 155 of the report, the officer refers to policy MD7, requiring development proposals to demonstrate they will not result in unacceptable impact from noise and vibration. The suggested conditions could go further to protect residents. For example, this authority's approval of the Gower and Ruthin quarries in 2019 included conditions for the advertisement of blasting times and explosives. If residents have a blasting timetable, they can adapt their lives accordingly, and in particular, keep their pets indoors. The applicant's experts report recommended a maximum 60-kilogram limit to blasting, but this is not included in the conditions. Residents seek a fully independent monitoring and complaint procedure so that there is recourse if conditions are not observed, and the introduction of ongoing stakeholder engagement as seen in the recent Gower and Ruthin approvals. The residents also question the need for increased quarry works at this site. The report recommends extraction based on landmark reserves, but local residents highlight the following points to ensure planning policy rails of the balance, adequate mineral supplies, sustainability and environmental issues is achieved. The latest SWRA-WP report, published in 2024, shows a clear decline in crushed rock sales. Most of the South East authorities report land banks of over 30 years, Merthyr 211 years. The 2021 RTS2 text clarification confirms a shortfall in places like RCT and Cardiff, numbering 15.7 million tonnes, are far outweighed by the regional surplus of 120 million tonnes. Plus, recent approvals like Gower and Ruthin add another 500 tonnes annually to the Vale contribution. Now, whilst it is acknowledged that highway improvements are included in the application, there is concern over increased traffic to and from the site. Heavily laden lorries invariably emerge slowly onto the highway, and there are frequent near collisions because of the more reckless drivers who will unlawfully overtake these slow-moving vehicles. There are concerns over the procedural issues of this application. This is an ROMP application designed to allow historical planning application to be updated with modern and environmental conditions. The applicant takes matters further than that, seeking consent to resume mineral extraction and deepen the northern quarry, a commercial expansion and not a modernisation update. The officer report at page 124 states that extraction in the North Quarry is not permitted by existing conditions. The 2019 approval of the Gower and Ruthin quarries application was dealt with by an ROMP process and a Section 73 planning application. A Section 73 planning application for this site could include provisions for a Section 106 agreement, which could raise the bar on any planning conditions to make them enforceable as legal covenants and include provisions for dispute resolution. The residents would ask that the application is deferred to get clarity of the above issues, and the residents reserve their position to take the matter to judicial review if there are procedural failings. Thank you. 4 minutes, 18 seconds.
Well done, Michael. Thank you very much. Are there any points of clarification for Councillor Morgan, please? From any members of the committee? I see no hands. In that case, we move on to our other speaker, Mr. Geraint John, who's in the chamber. You know the procedure, Mr. John. You've been here many times.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members, and good afternoon. And thank you for the opportunity to address you today. The application is, of course, recommended for approval, and given the case officer's detailed presentation and the recommendation, I'll keep my speech relatively brief. As members will be aware, and as officers clarified, this is not a planning application, rather a review of minerals permission. Accordingly, and as noted within the report before you, the application cannot be refused, but rather you, as the Mineral Planning Authority, may either approve the scheme of conditions as submitted or may determine a different set of conditions. The application seeks to amalgamate and consolidate the conditions relating to 2 current planning permissions and two parts of the overall site. In so doing, it enables the extension of the working life of the quarry until the latest already permitted date, which is 2042. A detailed revised condition schedule has been prepared with wording agreed with officers following extensive dialogue. Without repeating the content of the report before you, officers have closely and carefully assessed the application and have found that it is acceptable in all respects. Paragraph 3 of the second page of your report sets out a concise summary over the overall position of your officers. In summary, the principle has been considered to be acceptable, not least that given that it is in accordance with both national and local planning policy. Moreover, officers have deemed that the proposed scheme is acceptable from an amenity, ecology and highway safety perspective, subject to the imposition of those appropriate conditions. Highway improvements are also proposed. To support the application, extensive assessment work was submitted. Through consultation with both internal and external consultees, the scheme has been found to be acceptable in all respects. There have been no technical or other objections raised by statutory consultees to the proposal. It should be noted that the proposed development will bring about significant economic benefits, not only, of course, through the safeguarding of employment opportunities associated with the operation of the quarry itself, but by providing much needed and essential mineral resource to supply and meet construction demand across the region. To conclude, and in line with your officer's conclusions and recommendation, the development is in accord with the aims and objectives of both local and national policy. It's in this context that planning officers and statutory consultees have found that the scheme is suitable and acceptable in all respects, and the application is recommended for approval accordingly. I therefore respectfully request you to support that officer recommendation and confirm the acceptability of the conditions proposed. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. John. If you just hang on, see if there's any points of clarification from any members of the committee. I see no points of clarification. Thank you for your time, Mr. John. Right. Kerry, do you want to address anything that's been raised so far?
Yeah, I can briefly. I've just made a few notes as mainly in relation to the comments from Councillor Morgan. Just to note, the responses from the residents' associations, they are appended to the report. They're on page 178 of the report. So there's a full response. The full responses are appended there. Briefly, in terms of demand, I suppose we didn't feel. I mean, we do recognise that there's a land bank in the Vale of Glamorgan, and that's for roughly 30 years, which is in excess of the 25 we'd normally expect to provide. But there are, other shortfalls in the region, and although these may balance out, we feel there's a justification, and it makes sense essentially to make use or make best use of an existing site while the site operator is active, and essentially to ensure a steady supply of minerals remains in the region. There's a bit more about that on page 151 to 153 of the report, which I won't go into now. But with procedure, we do. Recognise there's been a Section 73 application not elsewhere. There would have been nothing to stop the Section 73 application being put in on this site particularly, but it's a method the applicant has chosen, and there's no procedural barrier to them doing that. The main things to note are there's no, it relates to the minerals permission. It relates to the same site. Also, the previous reviews have imposed conditions to do with matters of depth and the dates. Established the end dates of the quarry. So it would again, it makes sense that these things can be reviewed through subsequent review processes. It's not a one-time consideration. And I think in terms of the blasting timetable, I am aware they have a board advertising blasting times and dates at the site, albeit this is a voluntary thing that they do. This could be included as part of the conditions if committee felt it was necessary to do so, if there were good planning justification for it. I know that it was part of the Rutland and Gower conditions. Highways matters, I think I've covered those, so I won't reiterate. But it was just to do with, just to draw attention again. There's no change in the annual outputs proposed. The change really is to do with the amount of reserve that they can extract. So the quarry would operate for a longer period than is currently the case. The applicant or the operator has estimated this as 3.5 years. So it is a fairly limited extension as well. So it's just something to bear in mind. I think that's all for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Kerry. Yeah, the clarification on blasting times as well. I see on page, if I can get to it, page 171, there's a reference to blasting. No blasting shall take place outside the hours of 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. on Mondays to Fridays. Yeah. Right. I invite members of the committee to speak. Councillor Perry, your hand is up first, then Councillor Johnson, then Councillor Wilson.
Hi again. Yeah. Just sort of echo what Michael Morgan said. Now, this actually is partially in my ward as well, and I do get a number of complaints regarding the dust and the blasting, and better advertising of the blast times is obviously going to be appreciated, and I would ask that we do condition that. Michael Morgan said maximising the power of the explosive to 60 kilograms. I think that's reasonable to condition in there. The S106 I also believe is reasonable. Now, in the recent weeks, we have had incidents on the A48, and that has been raised today. There was a fatal road traffic collision involving a quarry style of vehicle. So safety on the A48 is now very much in the public mind. And I think that we should, as Michael Morgan has suggested, and other residents, defer this decision now until we do a site visit. There have been some works on the lane, widening and drainage, a lot of it without consent. So when I look at the proposal, I'm not quite sure what's already been done and what hasn't been done. So there's obviously a new gateway without permission, but there's also been some widening and drainage, some of which has been appreciated by residents and not by the Highways Authority. So I think there's a conversation to be had there. So I think we need to move deferral and have a further conversation and a site visit and look at the lane and speak with more residents about this, because obviously quarries are absolutely essential. Is there a need for the actual material that's coming out there? Some are suggesting there's not the demand for the amount, and this has been a big thing over the last 5 years is the extra activity. So rather than a sleepy, quiet quarry with the occasional disturbance, it is now a much more regular occurrence. And I think we need to consider the residents living nearby, because what they were living next to a decade ago is not what they're living next to today. If someone would like the second deferral, I think that myself and the residents would be most happy and grateful.
Thank you, Councillor Perry. Before I call in Councillor Johnson, Ian Robinson put his hand up in response to some comment that was made. So, Ian.
Thanks, Chair. I thought it was useful to give a couple of points of context before maybe there's further consideration about whether that's merited or not. I think it's just important to emphasise that what we need to be considering is what's proposed versus what's consented. So not what is proposed versus what might be a relatively dormant situation. The same was true of the Garwat and Ruthin applications that we considered a few months ago. Whilst the quarries had been dormant, there was consents for a level of activity, a pattern of activity involving a certain number of vehicle movements, quantities of materials coming out per day. So what we need to look at is what's proposed versus what is currently consented to happen. There's nothing about the proposals which suggests a kind of a materially different pattern of use per day. So in terms of other highway concerns along the A48, this isn't to dismiss them, but this development can't be held to deal with other problems that exist within the highway network. And actually, I'd probably say that the improvements that Kaylee described in terms of the access, passing bays, etc., actually materially improve the situation compared to the existing. So I just wanted to emphasise kind of the two things we're considering as opposed to just maybe the existing position. In terms of conditions in Section 106, I mean, Section 106 agreements are specifically not to replicate or replace the provisions of conditions and the things that conditions do. So if conditions can deal with a matter, then that's the way that it should be dealt with. I have no qualms about the enforceability of the conditions recommended, and they're legally enforceable. So I don't believe that extra control or different control is needed via Section 106. Yeah, I think those were the points I was going to make. I just wanted members to kind of be clear on the kind of the relevance of other highway issues and kind of the role that this development has in that, and what is a reasonable level of control, a reasonable expectation of this planning permission versus kind of wider highway concerns. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Kerry indicated earlier that he would be happy with a timetable, that the company should have a timetable for blasting, which is available for the neighbours to be able to consult, so they know when their animals and so on are in there. Kerry, you have your hand up. Can you confirm that you're happy to do that? And also, could you comment particularly on the explosive size? 60 kilograms.
Yes. I think in the case of advertisement, it's a fairly I would say it's a fairly simple thing for the operator to do. So yes, I think that can be added as a requirement in the blasting condition through variation. But to move on to the blast charge, it is mentioned in the noise report a blast charge is recommended, but it's also dealt with within the report. I think on page 156, the minerals guidance, which is MSAN1, advises against essentially setting a blast charge limit as part of conditions, just because it limits the blast design. So that instead there's a limit on the PPV, which is a measurement of ground movement. It's the ground vibration essentially. So it sets a limit, so they would be required to be beneath that. So as an example, 20 millimeters per second PPV, that's the threshold within MSAN1 guidance where beneath or below that, you wouldn't be expected to have cosmetic damage to dwellings, for example. So the limit is 6 millimeters per second for 95% of blasts, with an upper threshold of 10 millimeters per second for the remaining 5%, which may inadvertently go over the 6, but they should be designing it below that. And that is what's been happening. So that according to the monitoring that's been undertaken, that they've been below that threshold every time. So that's the point in relation to blast charge that is set out in page 156. One procedural point, deferral was mentioned. So I think one procedural point which is quite important, and I don't know the answer to this to a degree, because it depends on what the applicant may say, but these applications need to be determined within a 3-month period, unless an extension of time has been agreed, which one has. This extension of time wouldn't it expires next week, so it wouldn't cover another committee cycle unless the applicant agreed to extend it, which I don't know the answer to that. But if that were to lapse, the risk is there would be a deemed approval. Unfortunately, that's written into the regulations for this. It's something we can't get away from. So I would encourage committee in that case to, if we have concerns, to at least come to a resolution where there's some sort of set of conditions where we can impose. Otherwise, there's a risk that there's a deemed approval, which is, i.e., the consent is given for what's applied for. Thanks for that.
Thank you, Kerry. So deferral would be counterproductive. Councillor Johnson, your hand was up next. You would.
Sorry, Chair. I mean, I know that a deferral has been moved. I don't know if anybody's been seconded.
It hasn't been seconded.
We're just going to carry on with the discussion. Okay, thank you very much. I think some of the points that I was planning on raising have already been resolved. So I was looking at the comparison between the Garba Rithin conditions and the ones that have been suggested for this. So I think I think it's the Garwa Rithin condition is that blasting times shall be clearly advertised at the quarry site entrance, and an audible warning sounded prior to any blasting operations taking place and sounded again immediately after blasting is finished. I'm aware that what we have in front of us includes that an audible warning, I think, a warning siren shall be sounded prior to blasting operation and again when the operation is complete, but it makes perfect sense for people to be able to have a clearly advertised blasting timetable, because obviously if something can take place between 10 and 4 at any time between 10 and 4 between Monday and Friday, then that's no way to be able to timetable your life. So agree with that. Thank you to Kerry Diolch for the explanation of the difference between the 60 kilogram maximum suggestion, which comes from one of the, I think, from the independent experts, was it the noise and vibration report assessment on that? So understanding, how that works, I think is helpful. I think a lot of the reading this, many of the concerns raised by local residents are related to the regulation of activities at the quarries, and they seem to be seeking a means of resolving issues as they come about. So I don't know if that's something that we can realistically deal with within this application, simply because obviously it's how the activities are take place, and ensuring that there is no there is a limited what's the right phrase on this in English, to reduce the number of complaints between the residents and the company. But if those things can be resolved, then I think that will be very helpful. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Next hand is Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you so far for the officers for their reports on what they've said. I'm also thank you for Councillor Michael Morgan, who gave a very comprehensive report on the concerns raised by the residents. And I would like to touch upon one thing that hasn't been echoed yet, and that's really a discussion of perhaps having a stakeholder meeting with the two local members, obviously Councillor Morgan, Councillor Perry, but also I also think with the residents as well, and maybe a representative from the residents that could be elected maybe from the Resident Association, to have regular stakeholder meetings to look at the site and the impact upon the residents, and obviously look at the management plan. And can I also thank the officers and the applicant here for negotiating, which I consider to be, a really good piece of work in terms of passing places and the access from the main route from the A48 as well. And Councillor Perry, I can assure you I'm taking the concerns of and the serious accidents that we've had fairly recently on the A48 very seriously, and we are moving a step on that. And know that you'll hear in due course. But nevertheless, that's another matter. I'd like to move the application with those possible conditions that have already been identified.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Cope, your hand is up next.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me, Chair?
Yes.
Thank you. If I take you to page 179 of the application, it talks about permitted working hours. Now, we've discussed the blasting, but the permitted working hours are 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday to Fridays and 7 a.m. on a Saturday. Well, I'd like a lie-in on a Saturday. When building work was being completed near here, we were told that contractors couldn't really start work until 8 at the weekends, not 7. And also the finishing time, 7 p.m. during the summer. It depends what you call summer, and you can't rely on it, obviously. But in August, sunset is estimated to be at 8:24 this year. So that means that from 7 to 8:24, residents can enjoy their garden. So I'm wondering if some consideration could be given to those times being looked at. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cope. Councillor Buckley, your hand is up. Councillor Stallard, your hand was up next, and then Councillor Buckley. Councillor Stallard? Yeah, you had your hand up.
Yeah.
I'm writing it down.
I did, but I took it down because Councillor Wilson addressed most of what I was going to say.
Thank you very much. Councillor Buckley.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to second the deferral, however, to do that, if that gives deemed approval and is counterproductive, I'm not going to do it. Where the gentleman was on about amalgamating the timings on the two sites, along the lines of what Councillor Cope just said, I suggest we do the timings of working on the sites to the 1998 permissions, which is 7:30 start and 5:30 finish, Monday to Friday, and 7:30 till 12:30 on a Saturday, rather than extending the whole site to the 7 p.m. finish and earlier start.
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. Do we have any other comments from members of the committee? We don't appear to. Ian Robinson, you have your hand up.
Hi, Chair. Yes, thanks. Yeah, clearly a matter for members to consider if they're happy with the recommended hours. I just wanted to kind of add that it's fairly standard, those sorts of hours. It's what reflects daytime hours during the week. The environmental health officer hasn't raised an objection. It does mirror very similar hours on other quarries that have similar relationships with residential properties. Noting, of course, each quarry is different and has a different relationship, but there's nothing particularly sensitive about this one compared to others. I think the hours are reasonable. I just wanted to flag. I think that it's certainly consistent with these types of things that we've approved as recently as kind of 6-9 months ago. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Ian. Councillor Williams, you haven't spoken on this matter yet.
Thank you, Chair. We've had some considerable discussion and I'm thanking the officers for responding to those concerns that have been raised. The hours, I almost wanted to agree with the change of hours, but hearing what Ian Robson's just said, I'm content to stick with those hours. But I'm particularly noting that within the condition, it talks about a noise level of 55 max for near the dwellings. So I think that the appropriate conditions have been put in, and all the other questions being answered. So I'm happy to second Councillor Williams' movement of this officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. You seconded Councillor Wilson's, not Councillor Williams. Right, finally, then Councillor Perry, you have your hand up. Is this?
Yeah, so I share the concerns there with the working hours, and if it was possible to reduce that even temporarily, the working hours, because there's obviously the breaking down of stone on site, so you have the blasting, which is what it's intended for, but there's a lot of machinery, heavy machinery, breaking and grinding the stone down, which produces dust and noise, and it all depends how much noise comes from there as to where the machinery is set. There used to be sheds on site, but I believe now that the work is done in the outdoors and then vibrates around the quarry, and it gets louder. So, perhaps Ian Robinson could come back, and yes, in other quarries, this is the standard hours of operation, but can we put tighter restrictions, say after 5:30, on the amount of noise that can be emitted, and also for those who like a nice lie-in, the amount of noise earlier on in the morning.
Thank you, Councillor Perry. I don't know if Ian Robinson wants to come in on that, or whether Kerry would like to. Ian, you are on.
Yeah, happy to. Yeah, I my own view is it's not warranted. It's we judge these things by what's a reasonable level of activity given the existing consents, the existing conditions on them. It's not just to quote, it's not about wanting a nice lie-in. It's about what is a reasonable level of activity for this business. And yes, if we didn't have to have quarries to produce material, then great. There'd be no noise, no nuisance at any point. But these are a fundamental part of the economy. They're a fundamental part of the construction industry, and regrettably, there is a level of noise and nuisance that comes with it. And I don't think there's anything particular about this case that justifies a more onerous set of hours than we would be imposing elsewhere. That's my own view. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Right then, Kerry, if you would like to just sum up before we move to a vote, please.
Okay, yeah, I suppose it hasn't got too much to add, but maybe there's been a couple of points on the hours there. It's just I think as been picked up, they're proposing to amalgamate the hours across the site at the minute, and as you can imagine, having 1 hours on one part of the site, 1 hours on one set of hours on the other part of the sites would be very difficult for us to enforce. So they are working to the 2009 permission hours at the minute, and any shortening of that would be a curtailment essentially. But yeah, just to reiterate, Ian, there's no objection from the minerals team in Carmarthenshire. Like I said, it's a fairly standard set of hours, but also from our own environmental health officer in SRS. I don't, unless there's anything specific, I think it's over to you really, unless there's any specific questions remaining.
But we are including a recommendation on conditioning the notifications and the of when the blasting is taking place.
As I understand it, yeah.
So that's going to be incorporated in the final conditioning. Excellent.
It could be an amendment to. I'll get the precise.
I think that's what the committee want. So
of course.
It's not it could, it will. In that case, we will move straight to the vote. Now, those in favour of officers' recommendations with the conditions as amended, vote yes. Those opposed, vote no. Why isn't it coming up? One more. Someone dropped out. No, that's it. All votes are in. That is the officer's recommendations are supported, and so that can go ahead. Right. Thank you very much, committee, for this evening, and our speakers, and particularly our officers for their hard work. It's been a good discussion this evening, I feel. Thank you all. Have a good weekend and enjoy the sunshine.